Brno, German, Brünn, is the second largest city in the Czech Republic by population and area, the largest Moravian city, and the historical capital city of the Margraviate of Moravia. Brno is the administrative center of the South Moravian Region, in which it forms a separate district. The city lies at the confluence of the Svitava and Svratka rivers and has about 400,000 inhabitants. Its greater metropolitan area is home to more than 800,000 people, while its larger urban zone had a population of about 730,000 in 2004. Brno is the seat of judicial authority of the Czech Republic. It is the seat of the Constitutional Court, the Supreme Court, the Supreme Administrative Court, and the Supreme Public Prosecutor's Office. The city is also a significant administrative center. It is the seat of a number of state authorities, including the Ombudsman and the Office for the Protection of Competition. Brno is also an important center of higher education, with 33 faculties belonging to 13 institutes of higher learning and about 89,000 students. Brno Exhibition Center ranks among the largest exhibition centers in Europe. The complex opened in 1928 and established the tradition of large exhibitions and trade fairs held in Brno. Brno hosts motorbike and other races on the Masaryk circuit, a tradition established in 1930, in which the Road Racing World Championship Grand Prix is one of the most prestigious races. Another cultural tradition is an international fireworks competition, Ignis Brunensis, that usually attracts tens of thousands of daily visitors. The most visited sites of the city include the Spielberg Castle and Fortress and the Cathedral of Saints Peter and Paul on Petrov Hill, two medieval buildings that dominate the cityscape and are often depicted as its traditional symbols. The other large preserved castle near the city is Viveri Castle by the Brno Dam Lake. This castle is the site of a number of legends, as are many other places in Brno. Another architectural monument of Brno is the functionalist Villa Tugendhat, which has been included on the UNESCO list of World Heritage Sites. One of the natural sites nearby is the Moravian Karst. Name and etymology. The etymology of the name Brno is disputed. It perhaps comes from Old Czech Brünny, muddy, swampy. Alternative derivations are from a Slavic verb brunati, or a Celtic language spoken in the area before it was overrun by Germanic peoples and later, Slavic peoples. Throughout its history, Brno's locals also referred to the town in other languages, including Brünn in German, in Yiddish and Brünn in Latin. The city was also referred to as Brünn in English, but this usage is not common today. The asteroid 2889 Brno was named after the city, as well as the Brünn light machine gun, one of the most famous weapons of World War II. History. The Brno basin has been inhabited since prehistoric times, but the town's direct predecessor was a fortified settlement of the Great Moravia Empire known as Stare Zamky, which was inhabited from the Neolithic Age to the early 11th century. In the early 11th century, Brno was established as a castle of a non-ruling prince from the House of Přemysl, and Brno became one of the centers of Moravia along with Olomouc and Ojmo. Brno was first mentioned in Kosma's Chronica Bohemorum dated to year 1091, when Bohemian King Vratislav II besieged his brother Conrad at Brno Castle. In the mid-11th century, Moravia was divided into 3 separate territories. Each one of them had its own ruler, coming from the Přemyslids dynasty. but independent of the other two, and subordinated only to the Bohemian ruler in Prague. Seats of these rulers, and thus capitals of these territories, were castles and towns of Brno, Olomouc, and Znojmo. In the late 12th century, Moravia began to reunify, forming the Margraviate of Moravia. Since then, until the mid of the 17th century, it was not clear which town should be the capital of Moravia. Political power was therefore evenly divided between Brno and Olomouc, but Znojmo also played an important role. The Moravian Diet, the Moravian Land Tables, and the Moravian Land Court were all seated in both cities at once. However, Brno was the official seat of the Moravian Margraves, and later its geographical position closer to Vienna also became important. Otherwise, until 1642, Olomouc was larger than Brno by population, and it was the seat of the only Roman Catholic diocese in Moravia. In 1243, Brno was granted the large and small city privileges by the king, and thus it was recognized as a royal city. In 1324, Queen Elizabeth Radziwiłł of Poland founded the current Basilica of the Assumption of Our Lady, which is now her final resting place. In the 14th century, Brno became one of the centers for the Moravian regional assemblies, whose meetings alternated between Brno and Olomouc. These assemblies made political, legal, and financial decisions. Brno and Olomouc were also the seats of the Land Court and the Land Tables, thus they were the two most important cities in Moravia. For the mid-14th century to the early 15th century, the Spielberg Castle had served as the permanent seat of the Margraves of Moravia. One of them was elected the King of the Romans. In the 15th century, Brno was besieged in 1428 and again in 1430 by the Hussites during the Hussite Wars. Both attempts to conquer the city failed. In 1641, in the midst of the 30 Years' War, the Holy Roman Emperor and Margrave of Moravia Ferdinand III commanded permanent relocation of the Diet Court and the Land Tables from Olomouc to Brno, as Olomouc's Collegium Nordicum made it one of the primary targets of Swedish armies. In 1642, Olomouc surrendered to the Swedish army, which then stayed there for 8 years. Meanwhile, Brno, as the only Moravian city which under the leadership of Jean-Louis Radziwiłł de Souches managed to defend itself from the Swedes under General Lennart Torstensson, served as the sole capital of the state. After the end of the 30 Years' War, Brno retained its status as the sole capital. This was later confirmed by the Holy Roman Emperor Joseph II in 1782, and again in 1849 by the Moravian Constitution. Today, the Moravian Land Tables are stored in the Moravian Regional Archive, and they are included among the national cultural sites of the Czech Republic. During the 17th century, Spielberg Castle was rebuilt as a huge Baroque citadel. In the 18th century, Brno was besieged by Prussians in 1742 under the leadership of Frederick the Great. The siege was ultimately unsuccessful. In 1777, the bishopric of Brno was established. Matthias Franz Graf von Korensky Friar von Ledska was the first bishop. 19th century. In 1839, the first train arrived in Brno from Vienna. This was the beginning of rail transport in what is now the Czech Republic. In the years 1859 to 1864, the city fortification was almost completely removed. In 1869, a horse car service started to operate in Brno. It was the first tram service in the Czech lands. In December 1804, 1945, the Battle of Austerlitz was fought near the city. The battle is also known as the Battle of the Three Emperors. Brno itself was not involved with the battle, but the French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte spent several nights here at the time and again in 1809. Gregor Mendel conducted his groundbreaking experiments in genetics while he was a monk at St. Thomas's Abbey in Brno. The 20th century and Greater Brno around 1900. Brno, which consisted in administrative terms until 1918 only of the central city area, had a predominantly German-speaking population, as opposite to the suburbs, which were predominantly Czech-speaking. Life in Brünn, Brno was therefore bilingual, and what was called in German Brünnerisch was a mixed idiom containing elements from both languages. In 1919, after World War I, two neighboring towns, Krolovo Pole and Husavice, and 21 other municipalities were annexed to Brno, creating Greater Brno. This was done to dilute the German-speaking majority of close to 55,000 by addition of the Slavic communities of the city's neighborhood. Part of the German-speaking group were almost all of the California, 12,000 Jewish inhabitants, including several of the city's better-known personalities, who had substantial contribution to the city's cultural life. Greater Brno was almost 7 times larger with population of about 222,000. Before that, Brno had about 130,000 inhabitants. In 1921, Brno became the capital of the land of Moravia. Before that, it was the capital of the Margraviate of Moravia. 7 years later, Brno became the capital of the land of Moravia Silesia. In 1930, 200,000 inhabitants declared to be of Czech and some 52,000 of German nationality, in both cases including the respective Jewish citizens. During the German occupation of the Czech lands between 1939 and 1945, all Czech universities, including those of Brno, were closed by the Nazis. The Faculty of Law was transformed into the headquarters of the Gestapo, and the university dormitory was used as a prison. About 35,000 Czechs and some American and British prisoners of war were imprisoned and tortured there. About 800 civilians were executed or died. Executions were public. Between 1941 and 1942, transports from Brno deported 10,081 Jews to Theresienstadt concentration camp. At least further 960 people, mostly of mixed race origin, followed in 1943 and 1944. After Terezin, many of them were sent to Auschwitz concentration camp, Minsk ghetto, Brujowik, and other ghettos and concentration camps. Despite the fact Terezin was not an extermination camp, 995 of people transported from Brno died there. After the war, only 1,033 people returned. Industrial facilities such as arms factory Československé Zbrojovka, an aircraft engine factory Svigwork, and the city center were targeted by several Allied bombardment campaigns between 1944 and 1945. The airstrikes and late artillery fire killed some 1,200 people and destroyed 1,278 buildings. After the city's liberation by the Red Army on 26 April 1945 and the end of the war, ethnic German residents were forcibly expelled. In the so-called Brünn Death March beginning on 31 May 1945, about 27,000 German inhabitants of Brno were marched 40 miles to the Austrian border. According to testimony collected by German sources, about 5 5,200 of them died during the march. Later estimates by Czech sources put the death toll at about 1,700, with most deaths due to an epidemic of shigellosis. At the beginning of the communist era in Czechoslovakia, in 1948, the government abolished Moravian autonomy and Brno hence ceased to be the capital of Moravia. Since then, Moravia has been divided into administrative regions and Brno is administrative center of the South Moravian Region. Geography and climate. Brno is located in the southeastern part of the Czech Republic, at the confluence of the Svitava and Svratka rivers, and there are also several brooks flowing through it, including the Veverka, Pona, Suka, and Rika. The Svratka River flows through the city for about 29 kilometers. The Svitava River cuts a 13 kilometers path through the city. The length of Brno is 21.5 kilometers measured from the east to the west, and its overall area is 230 square kilometers. Inside of the city limits there is the Brno Dam Lake, several ponds, and other standing bodies of water. For example, reservoirs in the Marian Valley of the Zebetan Pond. Brno is surrounded by woody hills from three sides. A significant part of the area of the city is forest, about 6,379 hectares, i.e. 28%, due to its location between the Bohemian Moravian highlands and the southern Moravian lowlands. Brno has a moderate climate. Compared to other cities in the country, Brno has a very high air quality, which is ensured by a good natural circulation of air. No severely violent storms or similar natural disasters have ever been recorded in the city. Climate. Under the Köppen climate classification, Brno has a borderline oceanic climate and a humid continental climate with cold winters and hot to warm summers. However, in last 20 years the temperature grows rapidly, and summer days with temperature exceeding 30 degrees Celsius are quite common. The average temperature is 9.4 degrees Celsius. The average annual precipitation is about 505 millimeters. The average number of precipitation days is 150. The average annual sunshine is 1,771 hours, and the prevailing wind direction is northwest. The weather box below shows data between years 1961 and 1990. Its elevation above the sea level varies from 190 meters to 425 meters, and the highest point in the area is the Kopeček Hill. Brno is the former capital city of Moravia and the political and cultural hub of the South Moravian region. The city has over 400,000 residents. Its urban agglomeration has approximately 450,000 residents. Its larger urban zone had a population of about 730,000 in 2004, while its greater metropolitan area is home to more than 800,000 people. The estimated population of the South Moravian region is 1.2 million people. According to the Eurostat population estimate, Brno had 367,729 inhabitants, which ranks it among the 100 largest cities of the EU. Brno is situated at the crossroads of ancient trade routes which have joined northern and southern European civilizations for centuries, and as a part of the Danube Basin region. The city is historically connected with Vienna, which lies a mere 110 kilometers to the south. Administration. By law, Brno is a statutory city. It consists of 29 city districts. The highest body of its self-government is the Assembly of the City of Brno. The city is headed by the Lord Mayor. She has right to use the mayor insignia and represents the city outwards. The current Lord Mayor is Petovokral. The executive body is the City Council and local councils of the city districts. The City Council has 11 members including the Lord Mayor and his 4 deputies. The Assembly of the City elects the Lord Mayor and other member of the City Council, establishes the local police, and is also entitled to grant citizenship of honor and the awards of the City of Brno. The head of the Assembly of the City of Brno in personal matters is the chief executive who, according to certain special regulations, carries out the function of employer of the other members of the city management. The chief executive is directly responsible to the Lord Mayor. The city itself forms a separate district, the Brno City District, surrounded by the Brno Country District. Brno is divided into 29 administrative divisions and consists of 48 cadastral areas. This might sound confusing, but there is a big difference between a city district of Brno, the Brno City District, and the Brno Country District. The city districts of Brno significantly varies in the size by both population and area. The most populated city district of Brno is the Brno Center, which has over 91,000 of residents, and the less populated are Brno Rezin and Brno Uteko with about 500 residents. By its area, the largest one is Brno Bists with 27.24 square kilometers, and the smallest is Brno Novi Liskovec with 1.66 square kilometers. Brno is the home to the highest courts in the Czech judiciary. The Supreme Court is on Bořova Street, the Supreme Administrative Court is on Moravská náměstí, and the Constitutional Court is on Jostava Street, and the Supreme Public Prosecutor's Office of the Czech Republic is on Ježoušská Street. Demographics. According to the 2011 census, Brno had 385,913 inhabitants. The largest ethnic groups were Czechs, Moravians, Slovaks, Ukrainians, Vietnamese, and Poles. Brno experienced the largest increase in population during the 19th century at the time of the Industrial Revolution. A slight decrease in population after 1989 was caused by suburbanization.